Hey everybody, today I want to talk about some exciting news that I'm sure all of you are aware of, but there is going to be a new Beatles box set coming out in November 22nd, here in the US, and I'm sure all over the world. It is called The Beatles 1964 US Albums in Mono. Now, of course, this is not what we were expecting to come out this year. At least I wasn't expecting this. Probably like you, I was expecting to have the Rubber Soul Super Deluxe Edition put out this year, but I think they're going to put that out next year because then it'll be 2025, which will be the 60th anniversary of Rubber Soul coming out in 1965. So that makes a little bit more sense. Still slightly disappointing because I was really looking forward to Rubber Soul Super Deluxe Edition box set. And the last thing I thought they would be putting out would be a repressing of the Beatles US albums, let alone in mono. So kind of weird, and I know, like a lot of you, I'm just very confused by the whole thing, but let's talk about it, and let's talk about what you get in the box set, and I'll give you some of my opinions about the good and the bad of the box set before, of course, I have the chance to get my hands on it and listen to it, but just knowing what we know right now, and kind of giving an assessment of what I think about it. So first off, let's talk about the albums that are included in the box set. Now, they're all in mono. So the first one you get is Meet the Beatles, which of course is just an iconic album in American history, because this is the album that obviously broke the Beatles in America. And just, I mean, when I talked to my dad and my uncle and my mom about this album, this was the one that just every single kid they knew owned this album. And they probably owned it in mono, which this is a mono pressing. So yeah, Meet the Beatles, just a phenomenal album, gotta say. Next up, the Beatles' second album, and this is one of my favorite of the Capitol Beatles albums. Just a great rock and roll album. It's got a lot of cover songs on here, like Roll Over Beethoven, Devil in Her Heart, Money, Long Tall Sally. Just a really, really great record. I don't know if I have these in order, or they're probably not in order, but I'm showing them anyway. A Hard Day's Night. This is a bit of a dud, in my opinion. It's got some of the songs from the film Hard Day's Night, but it's also got a bunch of George Martin instrumentals on here. I know a lot of original American Beatle fans love this album, like my dad and my uncle. I have a big fondness for this album. For me, it's one I listen to probably the least of all, except for another one coming up in here, the Beatles US album. So Hard Day's Night. Something New, which may be one of my favorite US covers. I love the black and the white and the shot from the Ed Sullivan Show. Very, very cool photo. And The Beatles Story. I've made a video about this, which you can watch up here. This is my least favorite Beatles album, and in my opinion, the album that you do not need to own unless you're just a total Beatle nerd and maniac like me. It has hardly anything on here of musical value, is what I would say. It's just kind of a waste of time, in my opinion, but it's going to be included in this new box set. It will be an exclusive record that's in the box set. So you cannot, all the other ones you can get individually. This one is the only one you can get that you have to buy the box set to get this one, which is kind of weird, but okay. Beatles 65. Beatles 65 is another one of my favorites of the US albums. I love the cover, and just has a lot of great songs, mostly songs from Beatles for Sale, of course, from the UK. And then the early Beatles. This is the only one that I don't own a mono version of this. This is a stereo pressing that I have. And this, in my opinion, is another of the Capitol albums that I hardly ever listen to. And the other odd thing about this, so this box set is the Beatles US albums from 1964, except this was released in, I think it was January of 1965. So kind of odd that they're throwing this in there, but I get it because it's all their basically songs from Please Please Me or from the VJ album introducing the Beatles. So those are the records that come in the box set. Now let's talk about the good of the box set that I can tell so far. So the good, I have this stuff written down in my phone, so let me reference this. The good news, we're gonna get brand new Beatle records. That's always good, right? For me personally, all of my copies of the US albums are in pretty sorry, sad shape. Some of these I inherited from my dad, some of them I picked up on my own. It's pretty hard to find really mint copies of the US albums, at least for me it is. And granted, I think my main problem when I'm looking for mint copies of these albums is that I don't want to spend more than like $25, $30 on one of these because I don't love the sound on these US albums. So I'm not looking to spend like $60 to $70 for a mint copy of Meet the Beatles or whatever. So getting these brand new in the box set, it's going to be nice to have mint versions of these albums, these US albums. So that's a good thing. Other good thing, it's always nice to have another box set. I love box sets. When it comes to Beatles product, the box sets are what I want. That's what I'm interested in. I get so much enjoyment out of listening to, down here on my bottom shelf here, these Beatles Super Deluxe editions, even the red and the blue box set that came out. I just think box sets are really, really interesting, and especially during this time with the Beatles and what they're putting out, the box sets have been generally really, really good. So I'm excited for another box set. So that's very, very good. More of the good. Each of the albums comes with an essay written by Bruce Spicer, who is an amazing author and just a total just aficionado of the Beatles US albums. He's written numerous books that are all great. I'm not going to list all of them because he's written so many, but he's written some definitive books on the Beatles US albums. So he is definitely the right guy that they got to write these essays for each of these albums. So I'm really looking forward to those essays included with each of the records. The next thing I'll say, so when these albums originally came out, Capitol, of course, treated them to their own EQ, meaning, so when the Beatles sent the tapes over, they were already EQ'd and mastered the way the Beatles thought they should sound. When Capitol got them, they were unhappy with that sound for whatever reason, and a guy named Dave Dexter, who I'm sure you've heard of, he's the one who really decided that, oh, we're going to add extra EQ, going to add some reverb here and there, just stuff like that. And so the other thing that they did, because record players back in the 1960s were had much more of a simpler setup, and they couldn't really handle what modern hi-fi record players could handle. So if a record had too much low end or too much high end, especially low end, it could make the needle actually jump. It could actually skip out of the groove. So they had to be very aware of that, especially with records that really are going to sell to, you know, a younger audience, a teenage audience that didn't have the hi-fi players of the time. So they had to roll back on the low end, so take away some of the low end that was on the original master tapes, and take away some of the high end as well that was on the master tapes. With these new records from the box set, that is all the low end and the high end, from what I've read and what I've seen in some videos that they've released about the mastering of these new pressings. They're going to restore some of that low end and some of the high end that's there on the actual master tapes that they have. So that's a good thing. These are going to sound better than our original US pressings. And these pressings, as I'm sure a lot of you know, my personal opinion of them, they don't sound all that great. There are a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, the US Capitol pressings are pretty average to poor. So it's interesting that they are going to improve these and hopefully make them, they're never going to be as good as an original UK pressing, or even some of the like 70s UK pressings, or even the mono box set that came out in 2014. Those are the benchmark for Beatles mono pressings, in my opinion. These are just not going to be that ever. And I'm going to tell you why when I talk about some of the bad of this box set. But let's keep going with the good. Let's see, I guess that's it for the good. So let's now talk about the bad. So like I was mentioning, as far as the sound quality, when Capitol Records in the US were given master tapes from the Beatles from the UK, they were given third or fourth generation or even more master tapes. So what does that mean? So when George Martin and the engineers at the time put together the Beatles albums, they would create a master tape from of course, all the recordings and all the different songs and stuff. And that was formed as the master tape, which was then used to cut the records. So that is the first generation, is what we'll call it, is the master tape. Those are what exist in in Abbey Road right now in the UK. Then when Capitol wanted these songs to put out for themselves in the US, the UK people would make copies of the master tapes and send them to Capitol Records. Well, a lot of times they were making copies from second generation master tapes that they would make in the UK, like a backup tape or something, or third generation or fourth generation. And then so the copy of those would then become, if they got it from the second generation, then that copy would be the third generation that would be sent to Capitol. So at best, these come from third generation master tapes. What does that mean? So each time you make a copy of an analog tape, master tape, you lose a little bit of quality each time. Now, is it a ton of quality? No. It's not like incredibly noticeable to the naked ear, but if you are, there is a difference there, and especially if you start getting into the third and fourth generation tapes. That's why when it comes to the Beatles or any artist that you like that were releasing records during the 60s and 70s and 80s, there are better pressings than some of the later pressings, or vice versa. Like, it depends on what the master was that they used to press the records. That is a very, very important thing. So unfortunately, this new box set, it's not going to be an audiophile pressing of these records. It's just not. We all need to accept that the sound quality it's not going to be as good as the 2014 mono box set that they put out. That is, in my opinion, like I said earlier, the benchmark for how records should be repressed or should be re-released. If they're going to re-release an artist's records, they should treat it just like the Beatles did for that mono box set. It's an all analog signal. They reproduced the sleeves exactly as they were made back in the 60s, or as close as they could get them. They just really went top notch for all that stuff. With this new box set, I'm hoping that when they reproduce the sleeves, that the sleeves are, they try to be faithful to the way the original Capitol albums came out as far as the sleeves were made. We don't know how they're going to be, of course, until we get them in our hands. So that's the first bad thing. Let me get back to that, is that these are not going to be audiophile quality pressings. They're just not. That being said, they are cutting them with an all analog signal from their original master tapes, the Capitol master tapes. So are they going to sound bad? No. I highly doubt they're going to sound bad. They're probably going to sound very, very good, is what I'll say. Are they going to be the best way to listen to the Beatles albums in mono? No. That's just not how it's going to be, unfortunately. So next up, the other bad of the US albums in general. These are not the way the Beatles or George Martin or Brian Epstein at the time wanted the Beatles music. They didn't want their music released in this way. When the Beatles put albums together in the UK, they spent a lot of time getting the album cover artwork the way they wanted it. They spent a lot of time sequencing the songs and mixing them the way they wanted them. That was very, very important to them. In fact, they were one of the first artists who really took a hands-on approach to every single aspect of an album being released. So when the US albums were released and Capitol just kind of did what they wanted to, they would pick and choose from different albums, put other albums together that didn't even exist before, like the Beatles' second album, Something New, etc., etc. The Beatles really didn't like that. And in fact, John and George, at the time, there are interview clips of them talking about the US albums, and they bash them. They don't like them. They don't understand why Capitol has to do what they were doing at the time to their albums. There's a famous quote from John where he says, you know, we would put out albums in the UK with 14 tracks, and then our fans would say, how come we can't get 14 tracks? Or American fans would say, how come we can't get 14 tracks? All our albums either have 11 or 12 or 10. And John said it's like they would take off 2 songs for each album, which is generally really true. So they were unhappy with the way Capitol handled their albums. And I never actually heard or read anything about what they thought of the sound quality of the Capitol albums. I know George Martin didn't like the sound quality. But that's kind of a bit of a problem, I guess, is what I will say, is that the Capitol albums, just the US albums, they'll never be what the Beatles wanted themselves. And I know for a lot of American fans, they don't care because this is what they grew up with. And these have such a nostalgic value to them. And that's totally cool and fine. If that's the way that, you know, they choose to enjoy their Beatles albums, all the power to them. People like me, who I am an American, and I grew up obviously with my dad's record collection, and a lot of these were in that collection, and I grew up listening to these. Sure, they have a bit of sentimental value to me as well, but really it was the UK albums that I grew to love, because I know in my brain I knew this is how the Beatles wanted the music to sound, and that's an important thing for me when I'm listening to their music. So this new box set, it's always going to have that kind of cloud hanging over it, for me at least, that this is not the way the Beatles themselves wanted these albums to be released. So there's that. Let's see, what else did I write on my list here? Okay, so 2 of these albums, in my opinion, and I mentioned this earlier, are very, very weak. And they are A Hard Day's Night and The Beatles Story. Let's first talk about A Hard Day's Night. So A Hard Day's Night, when this originally came out on the United Artists label, and that's because United Artists is the new movie studio that put out the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night film. So they had the rights to the music as well. And then when this originally came out, it was a big hit. I think this was a #1 album in the US. And like I said, my dad and my uncle are still big fans of this album, and I know a lot of people are. But for me, it's very much, it doesn't do a lot for me. It only has, I think, 4 or 5 original Beatles songs on here. You get A Hard Day's Night, Tell Me Why, I'll Cry Instead, I Should Have Known Better, Happy Just to Dance With You, and then I think And I Love Her is on here as well. Oh, and If I Felt. Okay, so you get, okay, I'm wrong. You get like 7 original Beatles songs or something like that. But then the other songs on here are all just George Martin instrumentals, which in my opinion, they're nice, but I don't take this out to listen to the George Martin instrumentals. Let me just put it that way. So this has never been one of my favorite of the US albums, and I'm not really looking all that forward that much to this being in the new box set. I just gotta admit it. Not excited about this at all. Same goes for the Beatles Story. This was 100%, in my opinion, a cash grab created by Capitol Records to cash in on the Beatles' success of 1964. I think Capitol will go down in history as just not really understanding the Beatles, never really understanding the Beatles. In fact, when the Beatles were first becoming huge in the UK, famously, George Martin was trying to get Capitol to release some Beatles singles in America, and they were turning them down. So Capitol basically only took the Beatles on when they had no other choice. The Beatles were so huge worldwide that they had to release their music. And then I think even when the Beatles did break through in 1964 and Capitol were putting out some other albums, even then I don't think Capitol thought the Beatles were going to last. So they were trying to put out as much product as possible, cash in on the Beatles at that time, and get as much money off of them in that moment as they could. Which is why you get something like The Beatles Story. And for those of you who don't know, The Beatles Story, it's basically like a radio show. It's got very little in the way of actual Beatles dialogue or Beatles music. It's mostly this narrator who let's see, who is the narrator? John Babcock is the narrator. It's mostly just him, talking about all the typical stuff we already know about the Beatles. I'm sure at the time when this came out, maybe this was kind of cool for people who didn't understand the Beatles story, and maybe for people like my dad or my uncle, I guess it was cool. That being said, my dad and uncle both, to my knowledge, at least my dad for sure, didn't even have this in his collection. I had to pick this up on my own. So again, I'm not really looking forward to this being in the new box set. Let me add this to the equation as well. This is the only record that you cannot buy as a standalone. So you don't have to get the whole box set. You can get all these other albums individually when they come out in November. But The Beatles Story comes exclusively with the box set. Now, I do think it's cool that they are, trying to entice you that if you buy the box set, you're getting something that, you wouldn't be getting if you bought these individually. Unfortunately, the math doesn't add up, because I think these are retailing individually for like $29, I believe, so like, let's just say $30. And the box set is currently going for like $2.99 on Amazon, I believe, so like $300. So if you add it up, if you bought all the albums individually, it would only add up to like, I think 175, something like that. So basically, my math is probably way off, by the way, so I don't want to do math, but just go with me here. Basically, if you buy the box set, you're getting the Beatles Story and the box, which doesn't include a book, but just the box and Beatles Story, cost roughly over $100 together. That doesn't really make much sense. But that's what they're doing. And of course, all the box set together, this 1964 US albums in mono, of course, in later years, I'm sure this will be very, very collectible. And after I've said all that, I, of course, I'm the Beatle freak and I love Beatles stuff, I have already pre-ordered the box set. So I might be complaining about this, but I already ordered it because it's the Beatles. And I guess I'm okay with a little bit of, I don't know, unhappiness when it comes to certain aspects of the Beatle box set. Anyway, Beatles Story. I'm not looking forward to it in the new box set. I doubt I'll even listen to it. And I can't believe I'm even saying that, but I'm just being honest. I really don't think I'll listen to the Beatles Story, the brand new pressing in the box set. I just don't think I will. I've heard this one before, and I had to force myself to listen to the whole thing. Let me just put it that way. So, there you go. Okay, other negative aspects of this box set. So, some of these mono mixes, okay, this is going to be all these albums are going to be in mono for this new box set. All right, so my camera shut off, but we'll edit here. So some of these mono mixes on the US albums are actually fold downs of the stereo mixes, if you can believe that. And for more information on that, you should check out Andrew from Parlogram, his YouTube channel. He talks about that. That's where I got that information from. And Andrew knows his stuff, so I definitely believe that. So that's a bit of a drag, because when you fold down a stereo mix and turn it into mono, sure, it's now mono, but that's not the genuine mono mix. So it's not true for, of course, all of the songs and the mixes on these US albums, but there are a couple of cases where it's known that they are fold downs of the stereo. So that's a bit of a drag. All that being said, that's the good, that's the bad. And like I said, I have already pre-ordered it, so I will be getting it. I'm looking forward to this box set, and it's not exactly what I was hoping would be released this year, but I'm just glad they're releasing anything, because it's the Beatles. The Beatles are an amazing band, as I know you all know, and I love collecting the Beatles music. I'm not necessarily into the knickknacks and other stuff like that. I know there's a lot of other merchandise the Beatles are releasing for this 1964 celebration or whatever. That doesn't interest me at all. But records and music, the musical aspect of the Beatles, that is what I'm into. So this box set is going to be something I'm really going to cherish and really try to get the most out of it that I can. And of course, when I get it, I'll be making a detailed video about it. But I know a lot of people are disappointed, and that's okay, because you're definitely allowed to be disappointed, because like you, I really did think that this year we would be getting the Rubber Soul Super Deluxe Edition box set. And I love Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul, Revolver, that time period is like my favorite Beatles time period. I love the whole Beatles story, but if I have to be honest, the earlier Beatles stuff, like the Please Please Me up until Hard Day's Night-ish era, it's not my favorite of the Beatles time period. I love all that music. I listen to it a lot, and I love to read about it and all that kind of stuff. But if I have to choose my least favorite, era of the Beatles, early Beatles, not my favorite. So this box set, if I had to choose between this box set that's coming out, the US Mono Album 64, or Rubber Soul Super Deluxe, I would of course choose to have the Rubber Soul Super Deluxe. But it's okay, we're getting this box set now, and I'm happy we are. And then for those of you who I see, more and more I see when Beatles, or not just Beatles, any artist is releasing a box set or something like that, so many people get so negative, and I'm sure you've seen this too online, and it's like they just complain about, this is a cash grab, and oh my gosh, the price is horrible, and etc., etc. What I have to say to that is, you don't have to buy anything. There have been many things in the past the Beatles have put out that I have decided not to buy, because I don't have to buy everything, and sometimes I can't buy everything, and that's okay. But there are many things that I've decided that at the time when they came out, I thought, I don't need this in my collection. This isn't for me, and I just was waiting for whatever would come out next, and then that would be something I wanted. So just remember that. Sure, maybe the price is too high, and maybe it's not exactly what we want, but you don't have to buy it. And you can wait. Wait for it to come out. Wait for people like me, or people like Andrew from Program, or tons of other people are going to be getting this box set. Wait to see what they say about it, and what I say about it. Maybe that'll help you to decide if you want to get it. Because let me say this, they are going to make a lot of copies of this box set. It's going to be readily available, at least in my opinion it will be, and so you don't have to worry about it selling out and all this kind of stuff. I really believe that. So just wait it out, maybe it'll be great. Anyway, I'm excited for the box set, and I hope you are too. Please, in the comments below, let me know what you're excited about, what you're maybe disappointed about, and stay tuned for more videos, because I have a lot more coming. So anyway, that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye for now.